I'm John Maher. I'm Publishers Weekly's news editor, and welcome to Books on Tap Live. Today, we're going to talk to author Kerry Lonsdale, whose book Side Trip is a whole lot of fun. You might even say it's a joyride. Kerry, welcome.
Hi, how are you, John?
I'm great. I'm thrilled to be in your living room via this screen.
Yeah, it's my office.
Even better. I get to take a sneak peek into what's going on.
Yes, exactly.
So welcome. For those of you joining us, this is Kerry Lonsdale. I'm John Maher from PW. This event is sponsored by Amazon Publishing. We're giving away 5 signed copies of Side Trip, which is Kerry's book. You can enter to win by going to publishersweekly.com/booksontap-live. And we'll also put the link in the comments section on Facebook, so you have an easy way to get there if you're looking to get a signed copy. During this event, you, the audience, can ask questions by writing them in the comments section on Facebook, and we'll try to answer as many as possible after the interview. Also, if you'd like to receive notifications of future events, sign up at publishersweekly.com/booksontap-live. And I think that covers all of the things that I am supposed to say, which brings us to the fun stuff.
Yeah.
So, Kerry, what's going on with you today? How's everything going?
Everything's going great. It's been a busy week. The book launched on Tuesday, and it's just been one event after another, and just, responding to comments from readers who are reading the book. It's always such a weird feeling when that first just kind of gets out there and you get like the first feedback coming from readers. So it seems to be going well.
That's good. And yeah, I could only imagine that first publicity rush, is like it's a mix of, oh my gosh,
Yes, it's a mix of, oh my gosh, and you never know how a book is going to. You can get like all the early reviews and everybody loves the book, but once it gets out there, there's just no control over it, and they either love it or hate it. You just keep your fingers crossed, or you bury your head into your next project.
Mm-hmm. Sure, yeah, because you could spend all day finding everyone's opinion on Goodreads and Twitter, or you could,
Oh, I didn't catch that last part there, John.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think we got a hiccup. I said, well, you could spend all your time, going through the comments on Goodreads and Twitter, or you could just get back to work.
Yes, and that's what you want to do, is get back to work.
So let's talk about your book.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I think we have a bit of a delay. So let's take a second and talk about your book. Tell me a little bit about, why don't you just run us through the plot? Give us a quick drive-by.
Okay, quick drive-by. So Side Trip is basically, you have your character, Joy Evers. She is a recent college graduate, and she is very newly engaged, and she is going to take a road trip across country to move in with her fiance out there in New York. So the thing about Joy, she's harboring a lot of survivor's guilt. Her sister passed away about 8 years prior to when the book opens, and her sister was also extremely organized, and she has a whole bunch of lists, and Joy comes across a Route 66 bucket list. So she makes a plan to check off all the bullets along her way as she takes Route 66. Halfway between LA and Flagstaff, she stops at a diner for lunch where she runs into Dylan Westfield. And Dylan, he's a singer-songwriter who is also on his own cross-country journey, but he's not doing it voluntarily. And his car broke down. So the two of them kind of strike a deal for her to get him to Flagstaff because he's doing gigs along the way. And he has a deadline or a gig that night, and he needs to get there. And so what happens after Flagstaff is the rest of the story. And their journey begins.
And their journey begins. And it's sort of, it's a bit of a salacious journey at moments,
Yes.
which I think is a lot of fun. And and one thing, what I found really remarkable is your balancing between some of the harder stuff in the story and some of the fun stuff. So how did how did the story idea first come to you, and how did you decide to balance some genuine tragedies in your characters' lives with a story that otherwise is, a fun, joyful,
Yeah.
romantic read?
Yes. Well, the story,
Joyful, literally.
joyful. Yes, joyful. We're gonna say joy a lot here, right? Well, the book itself kind of came to me
Mhm.
a little differently than previous books, where if I'm doing research, I might trip across something that will trigger an idea, and then I'll noodle it around, and then I will dive into maybe writing back cover copy or synopsis to see if there's any merit or meat or texture to that story idea. But Side Trip came to me all at once. It literally, and every author's dream, the book just dropped in my head. I saw the beginning, I saw the ending. I had a really good idea as to what Joy's journey was going to be. Dylan was a little bit more of a discovery as I was going through my outline and plotting it and doing the first drafts or whatnot. But balancing the fun, light aspect of the book with the more serious undertones, I balance that about as well as I balance everything in my life. That kind of comes about as I go through the revision. So when I do an outline and I'm just bullet pointing all the plot points, and then I do a fast first draft, I go back and I layer and add texture to the book. And that's where the flaws come out. That's where I expound upon their motivations. That's where I start bearing their secrets and then revealing them as the book progresses. And I think that when there is that balance between the fun and light and kind of the more darker and serious, it makes them more real. It makes them more relatable to the readers. I believe the readers can identify with the characters more that way, which, if they're relating to a character, it's going to make for a more hopefully enriching reading experience.
I think that's certainly the case. I mean, I absolutely going through it, found myself identifying in one place or another with both of the characters. I mean, there's something very funny about, and this speaks very much to your ability to sort of finesse a darker undertone with a fun story. Like you we identify everyone experiences loss, right? And
Mhm.
everyone experiences some kind of guilt around loss, so it's very easy to identify with that kind of thing. But it's not always easy to understand that part of getting away from that is to just like let go and enjoy the ride as much as you can
That's a good analogy
away.
right there.
And I think that's kind of what the characters are doing, and in some ways, it's what you're asking your readers to do, which is something that I found really, really interesting in a few different ways. But one thing I wanted to ask you about is about your structure. So you were talking about how you outline and how.
Mhm.
So this book has a really interesting structure. It
Yes.
has, for those who haven't read it yet. Um, it has alternating chapters between Joy's perspective and Dylan's perspective. But
Yes.
it also has alternating chapters between the past and the future,
Yes.
or the past and the present. It's actually a little unclear, and that's kind of
Yes.
part of what draws you in. So
Yes.
you chose a structure that involved multiple different pieces moving around. How did you settle on that? How did you manage to keep those to balance both of those structures without it feeling too labyrinthine?
Yeah, yes. It was actually really interesting writing this one. I've got the two different perspectives just because I felt that was important for the readers to get to know both Joy and Dylan. Because as I talked about previously, they both have their different motivations and they both have their secrets. And it was the slow reveal of those secrets, I think, as we get deeper involved with the characters, which kind of made both of them a little bit more interesting. But yes, we have the before and after sections of the book. So the reader gets to go with Joy and Dylan on their 10-day journey on the road trip. And then we see them 10 years, over a period of 10 years after the road trip. And those chapters, the before and the after chapters, were intentionally kind of mixed up because, the reader, we're in a before chapter and then we go to an after chapter, and it kind of, there's a mystery there where the reader hopefully starts wondering, okay, well, what happened on this road trip for them to get where they are and what they're doing after the road trip. And kind of doing that hopefully helps with the suspense and entices them to keep on reading. But it was actually fairly easy to put together because I wrote the book almost as two separate novellas. So I did all the before chapters first, and then I did all the after chapters second. And then as I was kind of figuring out like a puzzle where the pieces would fit, then that's where the tweaking of the chapters happened so that they flowed much nicer into and easily into each other.
You did the chapters before and the after chapters after. It
got
doesn't always work like that, does it?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It actually, and that's why, at least with this book, at least since I had the entire idea all at once, it made it for a very quick first draft. And and it was almost, it's like any project. If you take it and if you can break it up into pieces, it seems like it goes much faster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you when you're writing other books, do you find that sometimes you write the ending first and the beginning second? Was this a different experience for you, or is this kind of how you often write?
I will, well, since I do a pretty extensive outline ahead of time and I already know pretty much how a book is going to end now, I will write, I'll be linear with the way I write, going from the beginning to the end, although every book is different. So an exception is, the book that I just finished now, I did write the ending first because I wanted to see if it would work. I think it's going to work. So yeah, every book is different, but this one is much more linear, beginning to end.
The book that you just wrote now, that you just finished now, is that a standalone as well, or is that a part of a series?
That is part of a new series. So No More Words is the first book in a new trilogy, which will be out next June. And so, yeah, back to the series. My first book, my debut is like the first book in a series. And then I had several standalones in between that. And now we're back into doing a series again. So it's kind of different. You got a standalone, you're with the characters just for that book. And then with the series, you're kind of living with them for a longer period. So it keeps writing interesting, and also too, I think with the series you can really dig a little bit deeper into the character because you're with them much longer.
Is there anything different for you in terms of how you structure and outline when you're writing a series than when you're writing a single book?
Oh yes, because since I outline, that means I'm outlining all the books before I start. Although I will say, I will say that with the Everything series, with my debut, that book, when I wrote it, I did not write it with the intention of it becoming a series. It was going to be a standalone. And then my editor at the time, as we were going through doing revisions, she's like, you can't leave this character in this predicament. You got to do something with them. So I did. And so I wrote a second book. And then the first book ended up being so well received, and there was a character in the Everything We Keep book that the fans or the readers just fell in love with, and I just was inundated with emails saying, we need to know Ian's story. And so the third book came out. But so what was interesting is that books 2 and 3, I was limited to what happened in book 1. Now with this new series, I was able to plot out all the 3 books before I even started writing them. So that way it gave me a little bit more leeway. And I kind of see the roadmap for the whole 3 books, as opposed to writing one book and then being stuck within the world that was developed in that first book, for the second and the third book.
Sure. That makes sense. I could see it being like different gears of writing, to stick with the road metaphor.
Yeah, every book is different. It's a whole different writing experience. Some get written quicker, and some of them you're doing so many revisions that by the time you send it off to your editor, you don't want to see it again.
You know, articles are like that too sometimes, I've found.
Yeah. How many rewrites do you do? And then you've got it memorized, and then you're wondering, okay, are you making sense anymore, or drawing out the emotions you want to, because you're not feeling anything when you read it anymore.
It's kind of like when you say, when you're having a conversation with someone and they can't hear you, you're on the phone, so you have to say a word over and over again, then suddenly it's like that word doesn't sound like it's a word in the English language anymore.
Exactly. Or the picture on the wall that you just don't see anymore when you walk by it. But it's there. Exactly. But that's actually, when you get to that point, that's the best time when you can actually kill your darlings, as the expression goes, because then you become more objective as you're reading through your material, and you realize, like, oh, this backstory here just goes on forever. We need to get rid of it. So, but that's part of writing it. And especially as you're writing the backstory or doing these flashbacks or any part of the book, is the author is learning their characters as they go too. And once you've been over it several times, then you realize, the reader does not need to know that. They don't need to know how they tie their shoes.
I want to know everything about my character, but the reader. So speaking of background, tell me a little bit. One of the things that I found really interesting in this novel is that the characters spend a lot of it living out other people's dreams, not their own, but other people's.
Yes.
And what that meant to me, I suppose, is that you had to, as a reader, what I saw was you having to come up with characters who weren't even in the novel.
Yes.
Because they were background characters to inform the lives of the characters you were writing. So how did you come up with the personalities for these characters that were otherwise absent from your story? And absent characters like in the main.
Oops, John, I think you're stall there again. John, I lost you on the last half.
Did I
in there? Yeah, you're falling out again. Can you repeat your question?
Of course I can. Sorry for the delay.
No, you're good. Oh no.
Were not in the story, but informed characters who were the center of the story.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna just kind of go off of what I think you were asking there. So yes, there were characters that were not in the story fully. They might have made appearances, like very briefly or whatnot, but it's almost creating these characters as to what the main characters, how they visualize them in their mind. Joy's sister Judy is one of those characters, and she was actually fairly easy to develop because I wanted somebody who was almost completely opposite of Joy. And so that Joy, as she's honoring her sister, she's doing everything that her sister likes. But just, it just goes against who Joy is. And she loves her 70s music. She loves her indie rock and everything from the 90s. And she'd rather have her skateboard than her little record player, and her poodle skirts that her sister used to love, who just obsessed over the 50s. So that was really good with the conflict. And then with Dylan, his big conflict is with his dad, and his dad, who is also deceased. But he's just got this lingering memory of him and what his dad wanted him to do. And he's, even though his dad's passed away, he's still in a roundabout way trying to, I guess, make his dad proud of him or whatnot. But there is that definite struggle there. But coming up with these, I do character sketches. But once again, it's as you're going through the different revisions of the book where they come more to life. And so there might be something to that character, or a lot more to that character in the last draft than there definitely was maybe a few drafts previous to it.
I hope I come through this time. And what about the motivations of the main characters?
Yes, the motivations of the main characters. Now, those, when you do a fast first draft, they're pretty much vomited all on the page right up front. And from there, it's like, once I understand what it is that is motivating them, why they're doing, what secrets they're harboring, then it's easier to go back and just, rather than info dumping up in the front, is just kind of smooth it like frosting throughout the rest of the book, so that you're just, sprinkling little snippets here and hopefully enticing the reader to devour a little bit more. And that's it with all the food analogies right there. But what's interesting too, when you talk about character motivation, and this seems to happen almost in every book that I write, is I'll go into a book with an idea as to what is motivating this character to behave a certain way. And it completely is different by the time that I have finished writing the book. And I'll have to go back and kind of pull that thread or tweak that thread, and it alters the book. So in a way, the book can be totally different than the way I had outlined it, but it's still following the same general roadmap that I had started out with.
But they kind of take on a life of their own, huh?
I think they do. And then that's where a lot of times, when you have twists in books, is like, I can't plot or plan or outline a twist. I can have a general idea, but I don't know if it's going to work until I start writing it. But I have to, even though I outline, I do have to give myself some leeway for certain aspects of the story and the characters to develop organically, let them take on a life of their own. And then that's when those like surprise twists come out and you're like, oh, well, let's go down this road and, see what happens.
And that's kind of, boy, it's easy to get into road metaphors, even when it's not a novel about the road, isn't it?
That's just too funny.
It's kind of funny how that is. It's very natural. It's really natural. So let's talk about another thing that's very important in this book, which is music and fashion and culture, especially the 50s and the 60s and 70s. Yeah. How'd you do your research? Where did you find all the stuff you wanted to include?
All the stuff that I wanted to include. Well, the 50s stuff was pretty easy. I'm probably dating myself here, John, in that I grew up watching Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley. So you got all that influence there. But come on, it's like, I'm sure all of us have like watched on, what is it, like TNT or those cable network shows, like the old B movies from the 50s, the Mars ones. I think I was just watching the original one the other day, the one from the 50s, not the radio show from the 30s. But the music actually was the most fun to research. I have a good friend, his name is Eddie Kaipo, and he is a monitor engineer. And I'm sure you come from the music industry, so you know that. It's the guy who's down there behind the big control box on the floor of a concert, and the one who's got to make sure that the musicians and the artists who are hearing what they need to hear with their earpieces and everything's working, etc. And he's currently, well, there's no concerts going on right now, but he's currently under contract with Enrique Iglesias, and he's worked with Gwen Stefani, and gosh, who else? I think Shania Twain. I know Tears for Fears, but he was really insightful. Talking to him, it was really insightful to learn about just the music industry, the business side of the music industry, because I needed to know that since Dylan in the book has got his recording studio that he's trying to launch. And so it was just fascinating talking to him about the different trends, even with regards to recording studios. However, there were so many in New York, and then they all kind of went away. And now you've got these smaller home studios popping up, and how it's become so easy for artists to just record it out of their homes and upload it to Spotify and get an audience that way. So that was really fascinating. He's also the one who told me about the tour buses, because he used to go around on the tour buses with the bands earlier in his career. And as the book highlights from what you've read, I don't want to get into it by revealing too much, but the tour bus rules, those are legitimate. And so that was fun to throw those in there. And then my other friend, Cielo, she is a recording artist. She's a singer-songwriter, and she was really good to help me get inside Dylan's head, because you don't think about it when, you probably know, you get up there on stage and you're like, is my instrument going to work okay? Is the equipment going to work okay? Is my voice going to work? Because there's that genuine fear and that genuine panic that it's all just going to fall apart. Looking out into a sea of faces, and are they responding to what you're performing? And she says some of the hardest things is you're sitting there performing in a bar maybe, and you're really just the background music, and you have to get used to looking up into is like nobody's really watching you, but you're just still having to play. And especially if it's original pieces, it's like writing a book. You want people to enjoy it, and then you can't tell if they are. But so it was, she was good to tell me how, you're standing on stage for a couple hours, you start to feel the weight of the guitar, your fingers start to ache because, they're over with the steel strings of the guitar. And just, and I remember for myself, because I used to play guitar another life, a long, long time ago, and just the calluses that you develop, the chipped nails, and just the physical and emotional toll that it takes going from gig to gig to gig, especially if you're just, part of the festival circuit. And during this, that goes from I think late spring until early mid fall, and you're just going from one place to another, and it's dusty and it's dirty. So that was a lot of fun researching, very insightful.
Could imagine it would be. For those of you who are tuning in with us right now, this is Kerry Lonsdale. We're talking about her book Side Trip, and before this chat, we talked about how I used to want to be a musician and then realized it was way too hard, and I gave up. So to go back a little bit to the book, Kerry, there was one really interesting thing that Dylan said early in the book. He said personal experience made its way into his writing every so often, but for the most part, other people enticed him more. And he was talking about writing songs. Is that how you feel about writing?
Actually, it is. And because as authors, we get asked the question a lot, well, who's this character based off of? Or who are you most like? Or is this based off of anything that happened to you in real life? And for me, I think it would be too difficult to take an incident or something from my real life, unless I'm writing a memoir, and to put it into a fictional novel, probably because I would be too close to it. And besides, don't we all find other people more interesting than ourselves? And that's where we become the people watchers or the eavesdroppers. We're sitting there in the coffee shop listening to the conversation next to us, wondering if, hey, is there something I can put into my novel? And so, yes, with regards to Dylan, I would say that's a piece of me in the book, because, yes, that's exactly how I feel.
And so the bucket lists, was that something that you had observed somebody else, or were you just thinking of how predominant they are in our culture in terms of like ideas?
Well, I was thinking, so Joy, when the book opens, she's 22. And I was thinking, what was I doing when I was 22? And yeah, it's the bucket list. You're fresh off of college and you want to do everything and go everywhere. I mean, I had my own bucket list, which eventually evolved to vision boards. And then life happened. And then I should probably dig up some of my lists and see if, any of them still are interesting, or to see what maybe I did accomplish on it, and start checking some things off. But let's get the kids through school, and then maybe I'll come up with some more bucket lists.
Especially considering that right now, everything is harder to check off every bucket list.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we have books, so you can armchair travel.
Exactly. It's hard to go wrong when you can do that.
Yes.
So through the book, Joy is dealing with, or is trying to plug through her sister's bucket list. But if Joy were to have a bucket list, and if Dylan were to have bucket lists, can you think of some things that might have been on their bucket list?
Joy's bucket list would have anything and everything on it that it would not be on Judy's list. I think for her,
okay.
Yeah, if you read through the book, I think there are bits and pieces in there that her bucket list kind of is threaded through there. And it comes out where she's kind of resisting what Judy's got on the list and kind of visualizing or thinking about what it is that she would do. Dylan, oh, his would probably be something crazy like visit every rock concert venue in the U.S. or something, or maybe find like some guitar, some Strat or Fender or something signed by Jimi Hendrix in a pawn shop. Who knows?
I mean, that's not a bad item to have on your bucket list.
No, it's not. It'll look great on the wall.
It really would. Speaking of bucket lists, we have one of our own right now, which is to truck through 15 more minutes of questions from you, the audience, who have been waiting for the opportunity to have me stop asking questions.
Yes.
So let's get to it. I'm actually going to be a little nepotistic here, and we're going to start with a question from my colleague Julia at Publishers Weekly, who wants to know, surprisingly, how you found your publisher.
How I found my publisher. Well, that came with the help of my agent, Gordon Warnock, with Fuse Literary. And so my first book was Everything We Keep, and it was on submission, and it got submitted to Lake Union Publishing. Danielle Marshall was the acquiring editor. She snapped it up, and it published a year later in 2016, and the rest is history. I think, it's like 5 years in, 6 books in, 5 years, 6 books. So it was a long journey, though. I mean, it wasn't something that happened overnight. You look back and you think like the past 10 years went by really quick. But I started writing the book in 2010. So that was the first word I penned was back in 2010. Acquired my agent in 2013, and then acquired the publisher in 2015. And then published in 2016. So that's 6 years with multiple revisions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the way. You gotta keep peeling at it and tearing at it.
Yes, and it's true what they say. You got to keep writing too. So while that's happening, you might have another book or two under your belt, which publishers love. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Janet asks, what's the toughest part about writing books? And I'm going to add a little bit to that. So not just what's the toughest part about writing your book, but also what's the toughest part about publishing your books? Because they're two different things.
Those are the toughest parts. Okay. So the toughest part about writing a book for me, I love doing the back cover copy. I actually like writing synopses and doing the outline. And then I love the revision process when you go back and you flesh it out. The toughest part for me is that fast first draft. When you are staring at a blank page and you literally have to motivate yourself to sit down in the morning, which I do. That always comes before exercise when I'm doing the fast first draft, because if I don't do it first thing in the morning, it just won't get done. And I got to get the word count in there. Now, the most difficult thing about publishing process, well, there's the tight deadlines or turnaround times with regards to editing, but I'd like to think after doing several books that I've kind of got a system down. And then the other really tough part about publishing is, you're throwing a book out there into the world to receive any sort of critique as possible. And no matter how thick your skin is, something always gets through, but you just got to put your head down and dig your feet in and just keep going, because you love what you do.
So I was just reading some of the other questions, and they kind of asked sort of some of the things that we've already answered, but one was just so beautifully written that I kind of want to read it aloud. So Lauren asks, are you a plotter or a pantser, which I can't tell if she means planter? What are your most effective strategies for ensuring the seeds you plant at the beginning of the book are carried through to the end?
Yes, I am actually a hybrid of the two. I definitely have to plot. I need my outline, and my outline hits all the plot points. It will have a whole bunch of character notes. And then after I do my outline, I will actually do an extensive scene. I will go scene by scene and kind of write out exactly what goals and objectives I want to achieve in a scene. And then after all the scenes are kind of drafted, then I will go and do that fast first draft. And that so far has worked for me. I mean, it probably is a lot of extra steps, but I think by the time I get to my fast first draft, then I kind of have a general idea as to what the story is about. I can't be a total pantser and just go in cold. I'll start sweating and then I'll close out my Microsoft Word and I don't want to deal with it. But and the second part of the question was, I don't think I got to that. Can you repeat that?
It was, do you, what are your most effective strategies for ensuring the seeds you plant at the beginning of a narrative are carried through to the end?
Oh, that outline. And also doing the scene analysis before I jump into, because I can go back to see, okay, am I addressing this? Did I cover it? And then once the fast first draft is done, then I kind of just check all that early stuff away. And then I will sometimes even just completely rewrite that fast first draft. But once that roadmap's there, it's there, and it just makes like the rest of writing it much easier. So, but there's been times when I've like gotten halfway through fast first draft and I've thrown it away. It happened this last time on my book coming out next year, No More Words. I started writing in January. I think it was mid-March. I threw away about 150 pages. Started over.
Oh boy. I would say I can't imagine what that's like, but I've had to throw out a dinner I was cooking for people halfway through, so I think I might have a bit of an idea.
It's kind of like that. Especially if you're on a date, you're trying to impress somebody,
Oh,
right?
God, I burned. I have been there. It is not fun. So remember when I told you I was a good cook? Yeah, do you like Sichuan?
Yeah.
Like,
I'm all for takeout, man. I can't cook.
It's kind of like writing. Once you get the hang of it, it's kind of, you have to plot it out.
Yeah.
But you also have to take it when things pop up along the way.
Yeah.
So let's see, who else has a question? Jana, I'm not sure, apologies if I'm pronouncing this incorrectly, asks if you've traveled to all of the places Joy traveled to on Route 66.
Oh, I have not. In fact, I've only traveled parts of Route 66, and that's down going east of Los Angeles and into Arizona. And that's about the extent of it. Now I've traveled north, going along the northern route. So there was, on my part, I'm ashamed to say, some research involved. And if part of the story, if I needed like a restaurant or if I needed a dive bar in a certain location that didn't exist, it got pulled from here and suddenly there's a bar there.
You weren't going through Google Maps trying to find diners along the route.
I know. Well, a lot of them are closed now. There's so much of Route 66 that it's Highway 40, and Route 66 is really just now a side road, and there would have been a perfect diner right where about where Joy and Dylan meet, and I believe it's called Roy's. It hasn't been open in years, and then it was that kind of gave me the idea of where I would put Rob's diner, and just doing the research on the history of Roy's. But yes, with the red vinyl seats and the vinyl tables, so yeah, it would have been perfect. But it's just kind of like a deserted area with a bunch of dust things going around, tumbleweeds. There we go.
Which is kind of a bummer, right? You think about it, how iconic it is in American 20th century history, and now it's just a tumbleweed.
It is. Well, it's kind of like without giving much away, that one scene when they get to Chicago, it's just this little brown sign stuck to a light post, and it's kind of a letdown. And then I did research the opposite way because normally people go east to west. That was traditionally the way that you go, out to along Route 66 and ending up down on the California coast.
I kind of like that though. I liked the change of the direction. It had this kind of Well, it had sort of an edge on the seat quality to it, because you were trying to kind of figure out what the characters' motivations were the whole time, but you were also kind of trying to figure out, like, the going east on Route 66, like, what's this about? And of course the plot tells you why.
Yeah.
You know,
exactly.
takes its time and tells you why.
Yeah. Well, you have to sometimes spin things around to make them a little interesting. You know, every book has got its cliches.
That is the truth.
Yes, every book's got its cliches, and this one's got plenty of tropes in it. But you know, it's all the little spins and the tweaks that you throw in that kind of spice them up and make them just different and hopefully unpredictable.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. About if you used Google Maps to figure out where they went, which kind of does a nice segue to Desiree's question, which is, how important is it for you to stay online or offline while writing?
Oh, as in, do I have the internet on while I'm writing? I think here's something that's going to probably throw everybody for a loop. When I do my fast first drafts, I have pen and paper. I've got a spiral bound notebook. I am literally just sitting at a table or going to a coffee shop and put my headphones in, and I longhand. And I think it's kind of from a creativity standpoint, you're kind of using a different part of your brain. I don't know, maybe when you wrote music or whatnot, if you wrote down notes. And then, because when I sit at the computer, and then I'll transcribe it onto the computer, but then I start analyzing every single sentence, even from pacing and beats. And do I want to say this? Do I need to rephrase this? And so I have a tendency to get a little technical if I start on the computer. So I need the notebook to be really creative.
You know, I feel that way too in terms of the computer. It's so easy to judge yourself when you see every little thing all spread out at once.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm a wimp when it comes to longhand. It's like, you know, my millennial hand wants a participation trophy just for scrawling anything else.
Yeah. And then you're on the computer. It's like I even have to put my phone away or my iPad away because it's too tempting. I have not yet got the app where it locks down my internet. So I should. Because it's like you get stuck on a sentence. It's like, oh, so what's happening on Facebook right
now? See, for me, it's the news. I don't know which one is worse.
Yeah, well, it's all bad right now. Some of it actually, in a way, it makes it easier to stay off.
that is the truth. Yeah, that is true.
Yeah.
That does make it a little bit easier.
Yeah, we don't even go to get our newspaper anymore.
I don't blame you. What's there that you want to read? So to sort of to wrap up.
You're stopping again.
Let's talk. Why don't you talk to them now? Oop.
Oh, okay. You bleeped.
Better?
You bleeped.
Maybe?
Okay. How about if we repeat that one?
What are you reading now? And what are you writing now? I know you've already said, but just in case anyone missed.
Just in case everybody, I am actually reading. I started last week Britt's book. Oh my gosh, I'm totally drawing a blank. The sisters or the twins, you know, the one that Britt's got out. And then what am I writing right now? I am writing the first book in my trilogy, which is called No More Words, and the trilogy is called No More. So that comes out next July. So it seems like so far away, but I have a feeling this year's going by really fast. So, and then and then I just finished reading Olivia Lara's Sunday in Paris. I've noticed that I've been reading a lot more lighter reads too. And I think it's probably because everything's just kind of a mess out there right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. I found myself sort of gravitating in some ways toward the same thing.
Yeah.
Quickly, before we go, I just saw another really lovely question.
Oh, good. Uh-oh.
She wrote Dylan's song in the book. She wrote the lyrics.
Oh, you're talking about my daughter.
Did I disappear?
Yes, you did disappear, but that's okay. I think I got the gist. Yes, my daughter, she's 17. She was 16 at
She
the
wrote
time.
the song?
She wrote the song. She did. And I asked her to. I said I wanted original lyrics for the book. And I asked her if she wanted to give it a shot, and she did. So she's actually gotten quite a few just comments on it. So it's been great. She likes seeing her name in the book too.
And does someone sing it in the audiobook version?
No, I don't know. I haven't listened to the audiobook. I've only listened to the first chapter. I haven't had time to get through it because it just, kind of came out. We don't have music to it yet. Cielo, who I was talking about, who helped me on it, she said that as we were kind of talking about, as I was doing my research, she said, "Oh, we'll have my daughter come over, and then she'll help her with that." And then Brenna's even been up there on her piano, kind of putting some notes together to see. One of these days we might, or maybe we'll do a contest and have somebody put some music to it. Who knows? But I would love to hear somebody sing it. I really would.
So would I.
I
would love to hear it.
Why don't you throw some music to it? Get your
So hopefully we can make that happen. Well,
yeah.
Kerry, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not that good. I'm not that good. Trust me, you don't want me to write it.
Yeah.
Well, Kerry, thank you so much. This has been great. Really appreciate you having this conversation with us.
Yes, thank you for having me, John. I really
and thank you everyone who. Oh God, we're on that thing.
We're good.
My pleasure. Thank you for joining us. And thank you everyone for coming and joining us on this live here at Publishers Weekly's Books on Tap, where we talk about the pages while occasionally drinking a pint, or at least that's certainly what I was up to. I had a little bit of stuff to talk to you about before we end. For one thing, the next Books on Tap live event is on July 15th. It's going to be with Daniel Bernstrom, and he'll be discussing his new children's book, Big Papa and the Time Machine, not to be confused with the Mamas and the Papas, who do not appear in this book but could have. If you're interested to get reminders, you sign up to receive a reminder of the event at publishersweekly.com/booksontap-live. I'm sure a link will run across the screen sometime soon. If not, you'll find it. We hope you can join us. Again, this was Books on Tap by Publishers Weekly, sponsored by Amazon Publishing. The book was Side Trip by Kerry Lonsdale. I'm John Maher, PW's news editor. Thank you very much for joining us, and we hope to see you next time. Take it easy.